Welcome to Finding Forgiveness, a family fairy tale podcast. Join host Susan Gibson as she summons the courage to ask the hard questions, probes deep, dark secrets, and attempts to fill in the gaps while exploring the relationship between her and her mother. Discover the magic of self-discovery, relationship exploration, and the profound journey of forgiveness. Now, your host, Susan Gibson.
Have you ever wondered what's in your masculine heart? Not your masculine energy or the masculine structures that may have influenced you, but what's in your masculine heart itself? It's not easy to separate the masculine and feminine inside each one of us. I've spent years trying to understand my own influences, my own behaviors, who my role models are and why, what kind of energy I have too much of, and what kind of energy I crave. I had a dream in the year following my mother's death that has been a puzzlement for me and for my therapist at the time. The setting was in a land like England. There was a large stone manor house that had clearly withstood centuries of existence. There was a tall stone fence around the property, a property so vast that you couldn't see the fence in its entirety. I was standing on one side of an open gate in the fence. I could see the manor house off in the distance, surrounded by rolling green hills and pastures, clumps of trees here and there, a pond, all that idyllic English countryside, or pick your favorite countryside with ancient dwellings there. My father was standing on the other side of the open gate, inside the property, if you will. Lying on the ground between us was a dead deer. Its head was towards me, its hindquarters towards my dad. My dad had a bow and a quiver of arrows, but he hadn't killed the deer. The peculiar part of this deer was that its top half, head, shoulders, rib cage, were as if it were alive, fully inflated. Its bottom half, belly, hind end, and legs were completely deflated and flat. Only the skin and the fur remained. But the outline was as if it were a fully intact deer lying on its side. My dad and I didn't speak. We just looked at the deer with curiosity. Then my dad turned towards a big tree right near us, with lots of branches and leaves that was completely covered with birds. He took aim with his bow and arrow and shot it, not to kill a bird, but just close enough for all the birds to take flight at once. It took my breath away. That felt like freedom to me. What I've come to realize about this dream is that my dad was my guide to finding the feminine inside of me. You see, the deer is a symbol of the mother goddess. And I've spoken before about my dad, as an ally of mine, but also exhibiting, embracing, embodying feminine energy for me. What I've also learned is that the feminine can heal the masculine nature inside of us. The feminine can help us find our masculine heart. The feminine inside of us can help us heal the anger and resentment towards the patriarchy. She can help us make friends with the masculine structure. Goodness knows I've harbored a lot of anger and resentment towards the patriarchy over my lifetime. There were periods in my life that if anyone cared to listen, they'd hear my rant about privileged white men and the destructive nature of the patriarchy that we all find ourselves living within. Thousands of years ago, the earth was not a patriarchal society. It was a matriarchal society. We worshipped the mother goddess. We worshipped Mother Earth. And over these millennia, that shifted towards the masculine dominated worldview and all that it's brought to us today. And I do harbor a lot of anger and resentment towards the patriarchy. However, it's softened over the years. And though it still flares up it still flares up from time to time, I do try to be more forgiving, trying to see the world in a more balanced way, recognizing that we all are caught in the masculine structure. So, I've attended a lot of professional conferences over my career, 40 years as a woman in tech. And 2 years ago, I attended a professional conference that I feel demonstrates how this newfound balance and forgiveness shows up for me. I wasn't aware of it at the time. When you're living in something and experiencing it in the moment, you don't always have the self-awareness to be able to differentiate, and be able to discern what's happening to you in that moment. But this, my professional conferences as a woman in tech, are always filled with men. And not all of them behave with decorum. Some are outright rude and have been rude, extremely inappropriate behavior all those years. Especially it seems that at events, people feel a certain freedom that they don't have within the corporate environment, within their familial environment, necessarily in their community environment. That they really let loose, when they're out on the road at a conference. And so, I'm usually on the alert. I'm looking out for inappropriate behavior. That's always been one of my things as a woman in tech, and making just being on that alert and doing what I feel I need to in the moment to balance out that inappropriate behavior that I find myself surrounded by. In this conference 2 years ago was no different. I was on alert. However, it was different. The world was different. This was the first in-person event for this particular professional community in 2 years. I was different. The pandemic initiated an enormous transformation in me, as well as an enormous transformation in the world around me. Others were different. The pandemic seemed to bring out more kindness and gentleness in some, more aggression and anger in others. I was standing with a small group of men, colleagues and acquaintances, making small chit-chat and generally catching up after not seeing one another for a couple of years in person. Another fellow joined us. And in this particular conference, you could collect badges for all the certifications you held. And everyone there in this small group held a lot of certifications, but we hadn't collected the badges. This was a peer-based conference, and we knew each other's credentials. However, this new fellow who joined us had collected his badges, and he had affixed them to his conference badge in a long sequence that cascaded below his knees. I could tell that he was just dying for someone to remark about them. You could just tell in his body language. He was leading with that without even saying anything. And nobody did say anything. We just continued our conversations, our small chit chat, catching up with one another. And he couldn't help himself. He set himself up for his quote unquote joke. You know how these conferences are. It's always a contest about who has the longest. I knew he would have some version of this horribly inappropriate joke. It's inevitable, quite frankly, when you're given an environment. I wish it were different. I wish that inevitability wasn't there, but it is inevitable. Someone's going to make some joke like that. I was the only woman in this small group. I thought 3 things to myself in split seconds, nanoseconds even. Okay? I could silently walk away, an action I've done in the past, and, walk away with righteous indignation. I was very good at that at certain points in my life, but that's not an effective action. I could tell this fellow how inappropriate his joke was. Another action I've done in the past. It was inappropriate. And when I have done that in the past, it's usually with anger and resentment, and it puts the other person on defensive. And then I walk away in righteous indignation. And it doesn't really change anything. It doesn't really resolve the anger and resentment I'm feeling. It doesn't really get to the heart of the inappropriate behavior. Can just pass it off, as something that's done and accepted. Number 3, my third choice, was to see what the other men in the group would do. And that's what I opted for. I had never done that before. I was always the one to act first. Either storm away or confront and storm away. I never just waited to see what would happen. They did nothing. Not a facial muscle moved. Not a bodily muscle moved. They didn't acknowledge the fellow or his joke. They just let it die. Empty space, empty air. That action took all the energy out of the fellow who told the joke. He looked pleadingly at me. He was standing next to me. Apologetically, perhaps. But nothing was said, and he walked away. The men and I continued our conversation naturally. Inside, I was evaluating what just happened. It was new. And so building up my self-awareness in this new situation, gives me pause to kind of reflect. Okay, how am I feeling about this? What did I just observe? What's going on inside of me? What's going on outside of me? So the first is the men found the joke inappropriate. They squelched it by removing the oxygen from the joke. Like putting a blanket over a fire, a small fire where the blanket won't catch fire, or putting a fire extinguisher on a fire that smothers it as well. It removes the oxygen. The fellow knew he was inappropriate without anyone saying or acting it out. The bros are evolving and are policing each other's behavior. Remarkable, amazing. I think I found my masculine heart that day, and it was filled with love and forgiveness. Oh, forgiveness takes so many forms. Forgiveness of another, forgiveness of self, forgiveness of a societal structure. I'm still working on forgiving the patriarchy. But I am grateful that I found my masculine heart and it's filled with love and forgiveness. That's important as I continue to heal myself. It's important to all of us as we continue to heal the world around us. One aspect of the feminine energy is turning that energy outward into building communities, into creating new structures within which we operate in our daily lives, okay? Reaching across the world for healing and growth, nurturing, looking at with reverence towards Mother Earth, our Earth Goddess, and understanding the impact that we have on our Mother Earth. And those are all aspects of the feminine. And when we can heal our masculine heart, it allow that heart to shine. Okay? That masculine heart can actually confront the patriarchy, can actually confront the masculine structures in a way that the feminine energy cannot. Right? The masculine energy knows the masculine structures, just like our feminine energy knows inherently the feminine structures. And so finding a way to find our masculine heart and let it shine, let it out, is so vital to our existence as human beings, and so vital to actually changing the structures around us. And it takes a combination of both the feminine energy and the masculine energy for that to happen. And what's very, very curious about this is that it takes the feminine to forgive the masculine. It takes the feminine to heal the masculine inside of us. That is so remarkable. That means you've got to have that acknowledgement of both things, right? The feminine and the masculine in us. Something I'm continuing to explore and to understand how it shows up inside of me. Yeah. Like I say, that anger and resentment definitely flares towards the patriarchy and the specifically the privileged white man, living in that within the confines of that structure. And right now it's a political cycle here in the United States, as it is around the world. And I think we are all re-examining what these kind of governing structures are around us. And trying to understand what's our place in these governing structures and what can we do to make a difference in the healing of ourselves and in finding that forgiveness that's so vital to our existence, and the healing of others and finding that forgiveness towards somebody who may have done you wrong, caused you great harm, and towards structures that cause us great harm. They're there all over the world. And understanding that and the role that they play and the influence that they have over us helps us to better understand what can we do to affect global change. I do believe it starts with self, then kind of propagates outward from that to those who are closest to us, into our community, and beyond and across the world. And in this global world that we live in, we are connected as humans across the great expanse. And so finding that masculine heart, hopefully it's filled with love, tenderness, forgiveness, and gratitude, right? Going beyond the masculine attributes, but really looking deep within the heart itself. I know what it's done for me. And it's given me, a different form of grace that I hadn't had before. And quite frankly, this is something newfound in me. And I'm embracing it with every part of my being. And when I say newfound, it's right up to this moment that I'm experiencing this and exploring this masculine heart and sharing this experience with you. I'd love to hear what's in your masculine heart. Or maybe you need some help finding it first. And I'd love to be your guide or to help you find your guide. You can email me at susan@findingforgivenesspodcast.com. Thank you for being with me today and listening to my podcast, Finding Forgiveness, a Family Fairytale. I welcome your comments. A big thank you to the team at Produce Your Podcast for helping me share my family fairy tale. Until next time, I'm Susan Gibson, signing off with gratitude and appreciation and a masculine heart filled with love and forgiveness. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Finding Forgiveness, a family fairy tale podcast. To continue the conversation, visit findingforgivenesspodcast.com and send an email to hellosusan@findingforgivenesspodcast.com to share your story. Until we meet again.